Tensions in the Ukraine-Russia war are rising rapidly. With only a few days left until the new year, both sides of the war are going through a very difficult process due to the effects of weather conditions and the prolongation of the time. This week, fierce fighting continues on the Bakhmut front, also in eastern Ukraine, in the line of fire. While the Kiev forces continue to strengthen the defense line in the Donetsk Oblast in the eastern region, the activity in the southern region of Ukraine, especially in and around the Crimea, has not stopped in recent days. This strategic peninsula, where Russian troops are constantly building up soldiers, is the scene of critical offensive operations like Ukraine's eastern fronts. While the harsh conditions of the winter season continue to be one of the biggest weapons working against both sides of the war, the events on the Crimean front were among the hottest topics of recent days. According to foreign media reports and hot intelligence reports from some countries, the armed forces of Ukraine may retake Crimea by August 2023. Considering this information, we realize that those of the conflicts in the war has decreased in some regions due to the bad weather conditions, and the effects of the war have begun to calm down a bit. However, it is thought that the 8th century Ukrainian army will not only provide Kyiv with a comfortable winter, but also allow it to change the course of this critical peninsula and its surroundings from the spring of 2023 until the end of summer. Now, let's take a much closer look at the Crimean front. It is possible to say that Russian troops have established a large resistance line on this peninsula and have increased security measures for possible attacks. The Russian armed forces do not actively carry out offensive actions in Crimea as in eastern Ukraine. At the same time, while Moscow continues its covert mobilization activities in Crimea, it gradually evacuates the Russian people from Crimea. The Moscow army soldiers, who are mostly in a defensive position on this peninsula, want to protect this strategic region against all kinds of attacks that may come from outside. But the Kiev army, on the other hand, continues to push the Russians from eastern Ukraine. On the other hand, wants to break the line of resistance formed by the Moscow army in Crimea. Aware of this situation, the Russian administration increased its attacks on Kherson, from which they retreated to divert attention from Crimea. Recently, the Moscow army carried out a brutal attack on civilian targets in the Kherson region. Kyrylo Tymoshenko, deputy head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, announced that 7 civilians have died and 58 injured so far in the attack carried out by the Russian forces on the city of Kherson. Ukrainian President Zelensky also reacted to the attack by Russian forces against Kherson with a statement he made on his social media account. Zelensky, who accused the Russian army of targeting civilians in Ukraine, said that Russia's attacks in the south of Ukraine are unacceptable. The objects targeted in the attacks are not military facilities. Russia's methods are not a war by the rules. These attacks are terror, to intimidate and to kill for pleasure. After Zelensky's critical statements, a remarkable preparation for an attack has been observed in the region, which includes southern Ukraine and the Crimean Peninsula, in the last few days. While the Russian troops on this strategic front line were waiting with their hands on alert, an unmanned aerial vehicle of unknown origin was seen above the Crimean city of Nizhnegorsk at the midnight last night. This drone, which put the Russian army's air defense systems in the Crimea on alert, caused fear and panic among the invading troops on the peninsula late at night. Shocking images of the unmanned aerial vehicle recorded on the video by Russian soldiers in this region were shared on social media. According to the striking video shared by Russian soldiers, the unmanned aerial vehicle that suddenly appeared in the dark of the night caused a very violent explosion near the military base of the Moscow army in the city of Nizhnegorsk. After a huge beam of the light spread to the sky with the effect of the explosion, the Russian soldier who recorded the video dropped the phone from his hand in a panic. The striking details of the explosion of an unmanned aerial vehicle of unknown origin targeting the city of Nizhnegorsk last night began to emerge with the sunrise. With the explosion of the drone in the city, a huge fire broke out in the warehouse of an oil plant in Nizhnegorsk. Yes, the place where the aircraft hit was clearly determined by the sunrise. Images taken from a security camera at the scene of the incident showed the moment when the said drone hit its target. After the explosion, medical teams were immediately sent to the scene. At this time, there is no information flow about the dead or injured in the explosion. The Russian administration expected such an attack in Crimea because the Moscow army has increased its non-combat actions against civilians in Ukraine in recent days. The Ukrainian administration also wanted to retaliate for these attacks in some way. Although Kyiv has kept its silence so far about the incident that took place in the city of Nizhegorsk, Moscow authorities blamed the Ukrainian side directly for the attack. However, there is no clear evidence that the explosion caused by the drone in this region was carried out by the Kyiv army. After the striking attack in Crimea, the estimates for this peninsula have increased considerably. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, the former commander of the US Army Europe, said in a statement he shared on social media that he believed that the Ukrainian army could liberate the occupied Crimean peninsula by August next year. Moscow illegally annexed Crimea in early 2014, however, most Western countries still consider the peninsula to be part of Ukraine. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges is one of those who believe that this peninsula is part of Ukraine. According to Ben Hodges, Ukrainian forces conducted numerous raids on the Crimea, and while these operations increased fear and anxiety in the peninsula, they also increased the security measures taken by Russia. If we consider the effective operations of the Ukrainian armed forces and the military aid to the Kyiv army from the USA and Western European countries, Ben Hodges' predictions are not without flaws, because the leader of Ukraine, Zelensky, has a very determined stance regarding this peninsula. Since the beginning of the war, the Ukrainian leader, who has repeatedly declared that they will take Crimea back, said that Russia's war against Ukraine and all free Europe began with Crimea and must end with the liberation of Crimea. After this critical statement, the Ukrainian armed forces has accelerated its offensive operations against Crimea. Russian leader Vladimir Putin, on the other hand, put into action defense plans to thwart attacks in this region. But Zelensky was determined and wanted to liberate both Crimea and other occupied Ukrainian lands. But the situation was not so easy for Ukraine as it is mentioned at the moment. Nevertheless, Kyiv did not want to give up this freedom fight in any way. A few days ago, President of Ukraine Zelensky, who made warm evaluations about the course of the war, stated that some citizens had to leave Ukraine due to the ongoing war against Russia, and some soldiers were taken prisoner. Zelensky said that we will liberate all Ukrainian men and women again. In a statement published on the official website of the Ukrainian presidency, it was stated that Zelensky shared a video congratulatory message about the Christmas festival celebrated in Western Christian countries on December 25. In the post, Zelensky stated that millions of people celebrated the Noel Day in Ukraine on December 25, but the people lived in difficult conditions due to war, and said that, unfortunately, all holidays have a bitter taste this year. Zelensky underlined that the war against Russia in Ukraine has actually been going on for 8 years, and that they will continue to fight for the freedom of the country in faith and unity. In addition, the Ukrainian leader added that power cuts continue as energy infrastructures in Ukraine were severely damaged in the attacks on the Russian army. We will see together if the predictions that the Ukrainian army, which is resisting the brutal attacks of Russia, will recapture the Crimean Peninsula, will be correct in the future. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications in order to be informed about new videos. Thank you for watching us.